Well, there's really a fundamental misperception that it's all, well, it's the old sex and drugs and rock and roll perception.
Yeah, I guess so, and that is heightened by most guys who in interviews, most of the musicians in interviews who overhype that one and overact that one, you know. And I think my book comes as counterbalance to say, hold on, guys, let's be reasonable here. Let's get back to fundamentals. There are normal human beings like me, you know, who have a normally, I'm happy to say, a great life in the music industry, which occasionally brushes up close to fame and fortune, but mostly doesn't. And this is what it's all about, you know. So the book is a counterweight, I think, to a whole lot of bullshit.
Right. Your book really is, it's a working man's perspective of being a working musician, even though you've been a quote-unquote star in certain situations.
It's a working man's guide. I agree. I think it should be a textbook at all those kind of fame schools, you know, that are growing, full of guitar players and drummers and so forth, who think it may be because they read in a magazine somewhere about sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and really they need to read this. Right.
You know, in America, I don't know if this is the same in England, but in America we have a lot of reality, quote-unquote, reality TV shows about musicians like Ozzy Osbourne or whatever, Bret Michaels, that are really, really staged, you know, fictionalized, very vapid television shows about what it's supposed to be like to be a musician, or a star in their case. What would a show about Bill Bruford be like, a reality TV show?
Well, there would be absolutely no one. They wouldn't make a show because it seems as though nothing ever happened. I mean, until recently, because I retired, so I don't do it anymore, but until recently, much of my working day is at a computer, same as 95% of the population. A small portion of my day is spent behind a musical instrument thinking about things to do with it.
Right.
And the rest of the time is in travel. So I'm either traveling, or I'm either behind a computer, or I'm behind a drum set. It's one of the three options, really.
Right.
And that's not going to make very exciting television, you know.
Do you ever watch any of that kind of stuff and sort of shake your head at it?
No, I can't say I do.
Oh, okay. Now, you wrote quite a bit about the cutthroat business side of the 70s record business. I wanted to talk a little bit about payola, which was still in full swing in the early days of your career. Probably is still in full swing, really, quite frankly, but it was more out in the open back then. How did payola work, and how did it influence the careers of bands you've been in?
Well, that's a good question, and you know, I don't really want to recount the entire book to you down the phone. And suffice to say, if you read it, you'll get a lot more information on this. But I was a kid who was just kind of watching things from the outside, and the incident that came up in the book, and it's not payola, you know, it's just the way people take people out to dinner. That the people, you know, they fix things. People deal. They always have done. I grew up with a young Richard Branson who was forming Virgin Records, and our manager in Yes had a word with Richard Branson, and before you knew it, Yes's record was in the Virgin Records chart.
Right.
Now, that's to do with charts, and as you know, and I'm sure I know, but the reader of the book may not know, what is in a chart is entirely the prerogative of the guy who owns the chart.
Right.
So you make up charts, and if you put the Yes record at the top of a chart, or even in the Virgin chart, which in England in those days was very hip,
mm-hmm.
Next thing you know, you're going to be an item. You're going to be a real thing. So, you know, we got a leg up onto the ladder, same as nearly every band has always had a leg up onto the ladder.
Right.
I guess payola is more formalized now in a sense of plugging operations and arm twisting, you know, that...
it's what they call independent record promotion.
Independent record plugging, independent radio production. Yeah, absolutely. It's a sophisticated world of business, and there's very little that the outside guy can do to influence that, really, until you attract the attention of the big player.
Right. It's I mean, it really is a money game to get big success.
It's a money game.
The trading of money and favor here and there and everywhere.
I'm afraid it is. Yes, yeah, and like young policemen who realize after a year or two that they can't fix crime, like young doctors who after a year or two realize they can't cure the world. Musicians after a year or two realize that this isn't only about how great your song is.
Right.
It has a lot to do with a huge amount of who's going to go into bat for you, who can bring your music to the attention of the market.
Right, right.
And for that, you need big influence and deep pockets.
Now, in several instances, you described Chris Squire as kind of slow-moving, perpetually late, and so on. How did the kind of interpersonal tensions in Yes, just lifestyle differences, financial differences, whatever, how does that play into the music? And is it healthy or unhealthy to have that kind of conflict in a group ultimately?
It's a very good question. I don't know. A lot of the British bands seemed to have that kind of tension. You know, I'm thinking of Daughtry Townsend, maybe even Jagger Richards. There can often be a creative tension. The guys in the Kinks, remember them? Ray Davis and the brother.
They would punch each other out on stage. Sure.
Absolutely, and I remember because we supported them in Yes.
Oh, is that right?
And there was a lot of excitement in that kind of world, and somehow it seemed quite a British thing in a way. And Yes, the members of Yes came from extremely varied backgrounds, so we even had linguistic problems. I mean, I had a real problem understanding John Anderson physically from a northern part of England, that I didn't understand his accent, you know. I couldn't understand what he was saying.
Oh, okay.
Regional accents are very strong in the UK. So, you know, right there, you're having a physical difficulty in understanding what people are saying, let alone what they're thinking and how they're... So, yeah, you know, there was definitely a creative tension. We brought all these things to the table, and you pushed and shoved, you know, until your thing surfaced, until, you know, your idea was accepted or something. And you get a result that way, but it can be bloody. And, you know, many of the English rock groups of the sort of first 20 years that I was in the business were a lot like that. It wasn't particularly pretty. You know, there was a certain amount of sulking, there was, you know, horse trading. The guy with the biggest biceps and the thickest skin tended to win. You know, and that's the way the song went. So it wasn't pretty. It wasn't pretty. We respected each other, certainly, but, you know, I can't say it was all beer and Skittles.
Right. Now, there's a chapter in your book entitled, What's It Like Working with Robert Fripp? I was somewhat surprised that there's not a chapter entitled, What's It Like Working with John Anderson?
Very good question. Nobody ever asked me that. But people consistently ask me, what's it like working with Robert Fripp? And the answer as to why that is the question is because Robert Fripp doesn't give interviews.
Oh, of course, right.
So if a guy doesn't give interviews, then I become the secondary guy. So I'm then asked, what's it like working with him?
I got you.
To which I can't say, go and ask him, because, you know, he never gives an interview.
Oh, okay.
And it's a long answer, but Robert has been a magnificent musician. He's got a wonderful intellect, powerfully intelligent guy, perhaps more a thinker than a player. And in part of his thinking created, you know, KingCrimson, and one of the best platforms for a drummer to be in, you know, in the latter part of the 20th century. Everybody would have killed to be in KingCrimson as a drummer because you could dream up the weirdest stuff, you know.
Right.
Great guy. I mean, he was difficult as hell, but hey, nobody said it would be easy.
He seems singularly unsuited to the public side of being a performing musician.
Doesn't he just?
Yes. It appears to make him almost visibly unhappy. Why do it then? Why not find something to do that would make him happier and then do it on the side or something?
Sterling, you'll have to ask Robert.
Fair enough.